So my kids, as of last summer, have now flipped a house and they've owned a business and they've lent money using a promissory note. And so each of these is a step kind of in the direction of, by the time hopefully they're 15 or 16 or 17 or 18, they have some concept of all the different ways that money can be used to help them, to hurt them, to build additional wealth. And so again, we're just taking all the things that my wife and I do in our everyday life, and we are applying that to situations, everyday situations with our kids.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Jay Scott from Bigger Pockets Business. He left corporate to live the life of his dreams. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today, I want to share a story, and I'm not sure where it came from. A mom saw her 2 kids fighting over an orange. You know how kids are when they want something. Each one trying to grab it, screaming, "It's mine, you can't have it, I want it." We getting a headache. What did the mom do? She did what we all do, right? She took the orange from the kids, she cut it in half, and then gave a half to each kid. Of course, things calmed down. But here's what happened, because she started to watch what they were doing. One of the kids peeled the rind off the orange, threw the rind in the garbage, and began to eat the snack. She noticed the other kid peeled the rind off, threw the fruit in the garbage, and began to slice up the rind for a recipe they were creating. It was then that Mom realized she made a mistake. If she had helped the kids to have a conversation around the orange, she could have created a better outcome for both of them. Life is always about finding value where others don't see it. By talking in the language and needs of others, you can create opportunity where others may not. The question I have is, what are you doing to find opportunity? As for me, I'm entering a new phase of life. And it's pretty cool. By using a lot of what we talk about, I've crafted my ultimate life. And now I feel totally in the flow, knowing that everything is going to be amazing. Maybe not the way I want it always, but in a way the universe sees best for me. Today, we have another great episode. But let's start with something to think about. And we're going to cover this in the episode. Do you have a money story of waking up and getting it? Many of us do. We're usually not taught about money. And today, we're going to chat about that. And we're also going to talk about how Jay Scott teaches his kids about money. It's a pretty cool story. Jay Scott is an entrepreneur, investor, and the co-host of the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast. An engineer and business guy by education, Jay spent much of his early career in Silicon Valley, where he held management positions at several Fortune 5 companies, including Microsoft and eBay. In 2008, Jay and his wife Carol quit their corporate jobs, moved back east, got married, started a family, and decided to focus on real estate and investing. In the past 10 years, they have bought, built, rehab, sold, lent on, and held over $70 million in properties all around the country. Jay is also a business advisor and mentor to several companies, business owners, and entrepreneurs. Jay runs the popular website 123flip.com and is the author of 4 books on real estate investing, including the best-selling The Book on Flipping Houses. His books have sold over 250,000 copies in the past 6 years and have helped investors from around the world to get their start in real estate. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Jay Scott. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I am excited to learn from you. As always, we like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I learned essentially nothing about money as a child. I had 2 amazing parents, still have 2 amazing parents, but my parents, and I think they'll be the first to admit it, that they were never very good with money. I grew up in a household where we didn't have a whole lot. My father was a salesman. My mother worked as basically what would be called an administrative assistant these days. And for much of my childhood, we didn't have very much at all. My parents got divorced when I was young. My mother got remarried. My stepfather was a business owner. And so when my mother and my stepfather first met, my stepfather was doing well. And I kind of learned that, hey, you can grow up in a household where people have more than just the bare necessities. But what I soon learned was that my stepfather was one of those entrepreneurs that went through the boom bust cycle very often. So within a couple years, one of his businesses went under, and things were tight again for a couple years. And then he started another business and things went well for a couple years. And so what I saw throughout basically my entire upbringing was a combination of not having much money coming in at all, and cycles of not having much money with having a lot of money, but watching my parents overspend and overextend themselves because they never considered the fact that they may go through a period where they don't have money again. And so my relationship with money was always a little bit strained. Money's always been a stressor in my life. I put myself through college. I graduated college with about $30K worth of debt. And I remember 28 years old and still had about $30K worth of debt. And I was fortunate. I had an engineering degree. I was in the corporate world, so I was making decent money. But I remember waking up one day when I was about 28 years old, and I said, this is not the right trajectory. I have as much debt as I had 10 years ago, and I'm spending more than ever. And I don't know what it was. I think I was lucky to be surrounded by a group of colleagues and friends from college who were doing well and were much more well-informed about money and money management than I was. And so sometime around 28 years old, I remember waking up one day and saying, I'm going to take control of this. And I've always been a quantitative, analytical person. So I created a spreadsheet. I learned about diversification. I learned about the basics of managing money at 28 years old. And my goal was to pay down that $30,000 in debt as quickly as possible. It took me about 3 years. But by the time I was 31, I was out of debt. I remember the day, it was January of like 1992. Literally, I remember the day that I got out of debt. I was at zero. And from that day, I started setting goals. I want to get to 10,000 in savings. I want to get to 20,000 in savings. I want to get to 50,000 in savings. And I became obsessed with money. And for the past 20 years, it's really been somewhat of an obsession for me. It's a good obsession. It's something I very much enjoy, learning about money, learning about investing, learning about building businesses. But it started pretty late in life for me compared to a lot of people. I know a lot of people, if you don't get those skills earlier, you generally never get them. I was very fortunate that at some point I found this obsession of money and money management. And so the last 20 years have kind of been focused around that.
I would say 28 is still on the younger side of getting the skill. I mean, I know some people come out and they're taught as kids, but for a lot of people, it isn't till quite a bit later that they wake up to that.
Unfortunately, I find that a lot of people never wake up to it. And so, yeah, I consider myself very lucky to have been surrounded by a lot of people in my life, not necessarily my family, unfortunately, but they also didn't have that upbringing. But I was very fortunate to find myself surrounded by a bunch of friends and colleagues that understood the topic better than I did. And again, it took me a while, but luckily I got on that path.
Besides friends and colleagues, were there some books or something else that kind of inspired you, or was it mostly just that close group of people?
It really was that close group of people. And luckily, we were all pretty comfortable talking about money. I know with a lot of people, even today, there's a terrible taboo around you don't talk about how much you make or how much you spend or how much you have. But I was, again, very fortunate, and the same four friends back then we're still best friends. We can have very frank discussions about money, and it's not competitive, and it's not a have to get to what everybody else has. It's very much how can we help each other? How can we take the information that we have and what we're learning and what we're doing and use it to benefit the group as a whole? And so that group really gets most of the props for where I've gotten today, because again, they were willing to open up and share and really be open and honest about money, something that can be very hard to find. And so I tell everybody that's trying to get on the right path, that's trying to build wealth, that one of the keys to success is surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who aren't scared to have those conversations. And it's good or bad. People that are willing to share their mistakes and willing to share all the things that have gone wrong and learning from each other, because it really is. It's a team sport.
It is. And unfortunately, we don't talk about money as much as we should. And that's part of what we're trying to do is get people to have those types of conversations and remove the emotions from it. Because at the end of the day, money is a tool. And I do not have a emotional tie to my hammer. I just know that when I have a nail, the hammer works. And when I have a screw, I need a screwdriver. And don't make the mistake of mixing those two up. And
absolutely,
then things work out quite well. Just out of curiosity, did these friends of yours, did they learn money growing up? Like, how is it that they didn't have a problem talking about it?
So at least two of the five of us, there are four friends of mine, at least two of the five had an upbringing where they learned a lot about money. I think their families were very responsible with money, and they've always seemed to understand it. And I would credit the two of them kind of with giving the rest of the group the knowledge and the impetus to kind of search for additional knowledge and the drive to really make changes. And so I think all five of us benefited by the fact that two of the group grew up with parents who had those frank discussions and taught them about money. And so we make a concerted effort right now with our kids to do that exact same thing, because one day our kids are going to have friends, and they may be the one or two or three of the friends that really understand money. And hopefully they'll be able to help the rest of their group and the rest of their network learn the things that we're teaching them that those other people probably aren't learning today.
So what are you doing to teach your kids about money?
My wife and I have always had this attitude that when it comes to money, we are an open book to our children. And we've stressed to them very early on that, hey, not everybody is like this. We don't necessarily go and talk about money openly and freely with other people. But within the household, there's nothing off limits. There's no question they can't ask. There's nothing that we won't talk about. If they want to know how much something costs or how much we spend on something, or how much money we have or what we do with our money, they are always free to ask us those questions, and we will have as open and honest a conversation with them as we possibly can. In addition, we're very big on allowing our kids to come into our business and our financial world as much as we possibly can, as much as they're interested in. And so we're real estate investors now. My wife and I were both in the corporate world for a long time, but about 12 years ago, just before we had kids, we kind of transitioned to entrepreneurship and investing, and we kind of fell into the real estate world. And so a lot of what we do now is real estate transactions. And our kids have been, to some degree or another, involved in those real estate transactions every single day of their lives. My oldest son went to his first house closing when he was 4 days old, literally 4 days old. And they are on site when we see houses. They're there at closings. They're there when we buy. They're there when we look at houses and talk to sellers and talk to buyers. And so we're always, basically, we open the door to them. We don't force the information on them. We recognize that they don't assimilate the information the same way that we do. But at the same time, we always having those conversations to whatever level they seem to be interested in having those conversations. So early on, we've talked about P&Ls and how income and expenses work and how businesses work from the time that they were very, very young. And we don't go into detail in those conversations, but then when my kids turned, I think it was 8 and 9, about 3 summers ago, my kids said, we would love to learn how to make some money. Or they didn't say it that way. They were like, we want to buy something. And I said, great, let's figure out how you can make some money so that you can buy those things that you want to buy. And we talked about it. They decided they wanted to do what a lot of kids do, and they just wanted to open a lemonade stand. We lived on the perfect street for a lemonade stand. And my kids said, great, let's start a lemonade stand. Okay, can you go get us some lemonade and tables and we can set it up and we can start making money? We said, no, this is a business. And we're going to help you start this business the same way that your mom and I have started our businesses. And I said, it was Saturday morning that we're having this discussion. We said, look, it's too late to do it this weekend because we need to do some planning. We'll do it next weekend. And we spent that week planning out how to start their lemonade stand. And we said, first thing we have to understand is you need to buy stuff. To sell lemonade, first you need lemonade and you need a table and you need cups and you need sugar and you need all of these things that you need to be able to provide to your customers. Where are you going to get those things? And they said, well, we have it all in the house. Can't we just use the stuff we have in the house? And we said, no, this is a business and we don't take the stuff that we have personally and mix it with the stuff we have in our business. We're going to go out, we're going to buy stuff that is specifically for the business and we're going to use it for the business. I said, okay, great, let's do that. I said, well, if we go and buy lemonade and we buy cups and we buy sugar and we buy straws, that's going to cost money. Where's that money going to come from? And they just kind of looked at us and said, I don't know. I said, well, mom and dad have some money. So maybe you could ask mom and dad to borrow some money for your lemonade stand. They said, okay, mom, dad, can we borrow some money? I said, well, if we let you borrow some money, what are we going to get in return? And again, they just kind of looked at us and I said, well, if you're going to ask somebody to borrow money, typically they need a reason to lend you money. They need something in return. And they said, well, what do you want in return? And I said, well, typically there's 2 ways we can do this. You can either give us part of the money you make from your lemonade stand, or you can give us the money we loaned you plus a little bit more back. And so we talked through basically how debt and how equity work. And we didn't use the terms debt and equity, but we explained the concepts that we can either go in and you can give us part of the money that you make from your lemonade stand, or we can give you the money and then you just have to give us the money back plus a little bit more. And they got that. So they said, great, we're going to, mom, dad, give us the money and then we'll give you a little bit more back. And I said, absolutely. And I said, let's figure out how much money we need for this lemonade stand. So we sat down and we made a list of all the things that we needed. We needed the lemonade and we needed the cups and the straws. And we decided we could borrow a table from the basement and we needed to buy some cardboard for the sign. And so we made a list of all the money that it was going to cost. And I said, okay, it's going to be, and I think it was something like $20. And I said, okay, well, now we need to decide, you need $20. How much are you willing to give us back to borrow the $20? And they had no concept. They probably would have said 50 or 100 or 1,000. They really had no idea. I said, well, how about this? We'll let you borrow the $20. You give us back $22. They said, great, no problem. Then we said, okay, here's $20. We handed them $20. And we said, let's go shopping. My wife took them out and they bought all the stuff that they needed, and they had to make decisions. They had to decide, are we going to offer one type of lemonade, just the regular lemonade, or do we offer a cherry lemonade? Do we offer 4 types of lemonade? What kind of cups? Do we have one size cup or 2 sizes of cup? And we had these discussions throughout the entire process of buying all the materials of, well, what products are we going to sell and what are the SKUs? And again, we didn't use the term SKUs, but we had this idea of you can sell multiple products, but you don't want to sell too many because then you have to buy too much. You don't want to sell too few because you want to be able to give the customer 1 or 2 different options. And so they started to realize that in a business, you have products and you have to buy products and you have to go through this process. Then the day of the lemonade stand comes. They make their lemonade, they set it up. They go out, they start selling it. We had to talk about pricing. Pricing was a huge discussion. And again, they have no concept from their perspective. I said, well, how are you going to sell the most? Well, we'll sell the most if we charge the least. So they said, we'll charge very little and that way we'll sell a whole lot of it. I said, well, if you charge very little, you're not going to make a lot of money. They said, okay, well, we'll charge a lot. Well, then you're not going to make a lot. So we talked through that whole process and we figured out how much they were going to charge. And then at the end of the day, they come back and they've got this box full of change and dollar bills and all this money. And I said, okay, now what? And they said, well, look at all this money we made. I said, are you sure? Did you really make that much money? And I said, now we're going to do something called a P&L, a profit and loss statement. And again, I may not have used that exact term, but I said, we're going to figure out how your lemonade stand did. And so we sat down on a piece of paper and I said, let's talk about how much money you made today. And so count up all the money in your box. And so they counted up all the money and it was something like $36. And I said, okay, that is called your revenue. That's the amount of money you made, $36. But you had expenses. There are things you have to spend that money on. So we spent basically, it was one line item on the expenses. It was what they had borrowed from us. But we went through and we listed all the things that they bought. And at the very end, I said, plus you agreed you were going to pay mom and I back an extra $2 on top of what you borrowed. And so we had this list of expenses plus $2 at the end. And it was 36 minus the $22. And they realized they made $14. And at first they were really disappointed. They thought they had made $36. But then they realized, wait a second. We didn't really make $36. We had to pay back this money that we borrowed. We had to pay back the interest, and they made $14. And so that was their first experience running a business. And the next weekend, we did the same thing. The next weekend, I said, but at the end of the day, I want you to create your own P&L. And what we did the next weekend was we lent them less money. They gave us back our $22. We still had lemonade left over. We had cups left over. We had straws left over. So the next week, we had to buy less stuff. So we lent them less money. And then a couple of weeks later, we did it again. This time, we didn't have to lend them anything because they had enough money to go out and buy all their own stuff, which they didn't really want to do. They were very hesitant to take all of their profit and put it into additional inventory. And I know with Profit First, I probably should have advised them not to do that. But we decided they were going to buy all their inventory themselves. And then they realized, wow, we didn't have to borrow any money. So every penny we ended up with at the end of that day was profit. And they started compounding that. And they did that all summer. At the end of the summer, they walked away with a couple $100. And for them, that was their first experience of running a business. And unlike a lot of kids who basically their moms hand them some lemonade and some cups and let them keep all the money, we basically forced them to treat it like a business. And again, they were 8 and 9 years old. They didn't really get it. We realized later that there was still a lot of concepts that didn't make sense. But we've been doing that with them for the past 2 or 3 years. And I realize every day that things are starting to make more sense. Things are starting to click. They're starting to get these concepts that we reinforce over and over and over again. And so it's been really good. And so that's just one example of the type of things that we try and do to teach these concepts and to reinforce these concepts with our kids.
Congratulations. Just out of curiosity, has that changed the way they think about spending in general?
Well, it's funny because they never really were very much spenders. And what I found is that to this day, they don't like spending money. And I don't know if that's something that they've learned from us or if it's more innate, but they are both very big savers. And one of the things that we talk about now is saving is great. saving is fantastic, and you should always save enough money to make sure that if something happens, you have enough money. And they don't have to worry about having to pay the mortgage or put food on the table. But I always say something like, well, what happens if one day you decide you really want to buy this game, or you really want to buy a gift for your friend's birthday and you don't have enough money saved? And so we always keep some savings in case we have an emergency expense or some expense that we really want to have. But then we talk about, well, now we have the rest of this money, and I think it was first described by, the first time I heard it was Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, described it as your money. You can think of it as little soldiers, and you send them out to battle, and they capture other soldiers and they bring them back. And that's how I always like to think about investing. You're deploying your money, and hopefully it's going out and it's capturing other money and bringing it back to you. And so we talk about the fact that saving is fantastic, but saving doesn't make you money. And investing makes you money. And so as you grow up, you have a couple different options. You can trade your time for money, or you can trade your skills for money, or you can trade your money for money. And to them, time right now isn't tremendously valuable. When you're a kid, you don't think about the fact that you only have a limited amount of time. So it hasn't really hit them. But when they hear, oh, I don't necessarily have to work for my money when I get older. At some point, if I have enough money and I know how to use it, I can trade money for more money, or I can trade my knowledge and my skills and my expertise for more money. I don't necessarily have to trade working 8 hours or 10 hours a day for money. There's other ways. And so we have those discussions. As real estate investors, a lot of what we do involves borrowing money and loaning money for investments. And so we've taught our kids early on what it means to borrow money and to loan money. And so after the first summer of doing the lemonade stand, our kids walked away, like I said, with a couple $100. At that point, school was starting up again. They weren't going to make any more money. And I said, you have a couple $100 now. What do we want to do with this? Let's talk about what we do with our money. And this is where we had the typical discussion of there's buckets. So we should save some, we should donate some, and then we should spend some. We should always spend some of our money because we want to reward ourselves for the hard work that we did. We don't have to spend a lot of it, but we should always be rewarding ourselves at least a little bit for the hard work we did. I said, but now we have this money that we're planning on saving. Do we just put it in the bank, or do we do something else with it? And they said, well, what should we do with it? And I said, well, here's something that mom and dad do when they have money that they have saved and they want to earn more money. They lend it to other people. And so we talked through what it means to make loans. And we actually created a promissory note. They said, okay, Dad, we'd love to loan you this money. And they each, I don't remember exactly, and I actually have pictures of the promissory note still, but I think it was something like $200 each. And I said, well, if you want, you can loan that money to mom and dad. Mom and dad do other things with money. We can always use more money. So if you loan it to us, we will give you 10% per month interest. And we talked about what percentage meant. And so I said, if you loan us $200, we'll give you $20 extra for every month that you let us hold that money. And they said, oh, well, that sounds good. So I said, but we need to do this the right way. So we wrote up a promissory note, very simple, that said, basically, mom and dad are borrowing money from our kids' names. Mom and dad agree to pay monthly 10% interest, or $20, for as long as we want to keep this money. And mom and dad can pay back the money anytime they want. And all three of us signed it. And I said to the kids, I said, now, every month we need to be giving you $20. But it's also your responsibility to remember to ask us if we don't, because that's your money. And I remember the first month, they didn't ask for the money. Second month, they didn't ask for the money. At some point, one of the kids remembered, hey, Dad, I want to buy something and you have our money. Can I have some of that money back? I said, well, I owe you actually $40 from the 2 months previous, but you never asked for that money. What are we supposed to do here? And so we talked through how that works. And then we talked through the fact that they wanted money to buy something. And I said, well, you loaned us the money. It's not yours right now. I have the right to use this money. And at some point, I can give it back to you. It doesn't say that I have to give it back to you. And so it basically kind of reinforced that whole idea of, well, there's ways to make money, but sometimes there's trade-offs. If you're going to loan somebody money, well, now you don't have access to it. And so basically we treat all our financial decisions, all of our finances in the family, the way we do in our business. And our kids loan us money all the time. They're never going to get better interest than what we pay. And we know that paying them 5% annual interest isn't going to teach them anything because they don't grasp that concept of making $5 in a year. But we're happy to give them 10% a month. They'll eventually learn that that's not realistic, but that keeps them motivated and excited, and it keeps them invested in this whole idea of loaning money is a really good thing. And so I have right behind me a couple promissory notes from all the money that they've loaned to us, and we pay them interest every month. And they sometimes loan some of that back to us. They spend it, they save it, they donate it to charity. And it was about a year ago, I think it was last summer, the kids had a decent amount of money. And I said, we're getting ready to do a real estate investment. We're going to flip a house. And I said, if you guys would like, I would love for you to be our financial partners. I said, you guys have some amount of money. I think it was like $500 or $600 at that point. I said, how about if you take that $500 or $600 and you become a financial partner with us in this house flip that we're going to do? And what that means is you give us the money. We'll combine it with our money. You'll have some percentage. And again, I didn't necessarily use these terms. I said, you'll own some percentage of the property. Now you have to help us with it. You need to help us find the deal, and you need to help us manage the contractors, and you need to go through the whole process with us. And then at the end, hopefully we'll all make some money, and part of that money will be yours and part of that money will be ours. And they didn't really, again, get the whole concept, but they said, okay, let's do that. And last summer we bought a house here in Sarasota, and we flipped a house together. It was the first project that we literally did with my kids as partners in the deal. So my kids, as of last summer, have now flipped a house, and they've owned a business, and they've lent money using a promissory note. And so each of these is a step kind of in the direction of, by the time hopefully they're 15 or 16 or 17 or 18, they have some concept of all the different ways that money can be used to help them, to hurt them, to build additional wealth. And so, again, we're just taking all the things that my wife and I do in our everyday life, and we are applying that to situations, everyday situations with our kids.
That's impressive. We did similar but different and at different times throughout. But you've literally got to have your kids involved, and then you have to have the honesty and the open discussions, because otherwise they are not going to learn about money. And just from what you've shared, your kids are going to be on a very strong footing early on, and they're going to be able to create their own success with whatever it is that they choose to do, because they understand money. And unfortunately, we're not teaching kids enough about money. So congrats on doing that.
Thanks. I think one of the big mistakes that I've realized, and it's one of those things that you never really understand until you're a parent, is that we always assume, we talk about this idea of we need to be better at teaching money to kids in school. And I 100% agree. We need to have some more formalized education around money and finances. But what I've also realized as a parent is having a discussion one time, or handing your kids a book, or having them take a class in school isn't enough to really reinforce all the ideas. Kids don't inherently get this idea of a business or a P&L, or even the most basic thing. So the little story from a couple months ago, my youngest one, I think he was 9 at the time, we were just in the car, and we were talking about business and investing and working in life the way we often do in the car. And we were talking about working a job. And when you grow up, basically the goal is to kind of find a job. If you don't want to own a business, if you're not ready to own a business, if you're going to find a job, hopefully you can find a job that's something you're good at, something that somebody's willing to pay you for, and something that you enjoy. Like you want to kind of optimize for those three things as much as possible. And so we were talking about this whole idea of working and getting a job. And my 9-year-old looked up and said to us, and keep in mind, we've been having conversations like this for, at this point, probably 5 years. My 9-year-old looked up at us and said, "So, Dad, how much do I need to pay for a job that I really like?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, if I find a job I really like, how much am I going to have to pay to get that job?" And what I realized was, we've been having this discussion about finances and money and work and everything for years. And I had never really explained to him that this idea of having a job you really like, you get paid for that. Like somebody will actually hire you to do a job that you like. He's sitting here thinking that if he finds a job that he really likes, he has to pay for that job. And so this was something that I figured we were 5 years past. I thought, well, no, he gets how money works and how jobs work and you pay to, and he didn't even get this most basic concept. And what it made me realize is kids don't get these things inherently. Kids don't, you can talk about a P&L, you can talk about revenue and expenses and profit and all that and use these terms. And even adults, you can teach them something, but until they actually apply it themselves, until they actually use it in real life, a lot of times it doesn't click, it doesn't make sense. And obviously, we who have done this for a long time, we think, okay, I just showed them a formula on a piece of paper and they understand it, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. And so now that whole discussion kind of reminded me that every time I have a discussion with my kids, I shouldn't assume that even the most basic thing like jobs pay you is obvious to them. Because as kids, if you've never had a job, things like that might not be obvious. And so it's just a good reminder that you can't teach kids, especially about financial topics over the course of a day or a week or a month. It really is something that they have to learn over and over and over and over until they actually have a chance to apply it. And then hopefully one day it all kind of just clicks.
And I've always said, learning how to use money is like learning to play golf. You can read all the books about golf you want. You can watch all the golf you want on TV. Till you swing that club, you don't know how to play golf.
Exactly.
Money is the same way. And I know I coached my kids a lot in a variety of sports and activities as they were growing. One of the biggest issues that I always saw were that coaches were coaching what they knew, but they weren't explaining it in a way that a kid could understand. And it's basically what you're talking about. You're talking at this level that you have all those frames of reference. The average kid doesn't have those frames of reference yet. So when you're playing baseball and you tell a kid to run home, what he's thinking is he's going to run to his house, right? Because he doesn't have the frame of reference yet.
It's something, again, you're absolutely right. We as parents have to remind ourselves that the most basic things aren't necessarily obvious. These are constructs. These aren't things like they're not innate. Standing up and walking. If I don't teach my child how to stand up and walk, eventually he'll figure it out. And if I don't teach my child math, well, he'll eventually learn enough math to get through life. And reading, he'll eventually learn enough about how to read just in the natural situations that my kids are in. They'll learn how to read. But they're not going to learn that with money. They're not going to learn that with business if they're not taught, because they'll never be in enough natural situations where it's being done correctly. And two, it's not a natural thing. It's a man-made construct, and it's something that we really need to talk about and reinforce years and years and years until one day, hopefully, it finally clicks.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. So very true. So let's take a step back. You got out of college, you went into corporate.
Yep.
How was that?
I loved it. I was fortunate. I got to work for a couple of really great companies. I spent much of my career at Microsoft, and I had an engineering degree. I got my MBA while I was at Microsoft. They paid for it. So basically, I had that good mix of the analytical and the hard sciencey type skills, and also the business skills. And so I feel like that kind of gave me a good, well-rounded view of business and the business world. And so for me, I always liked a lot of people will tell you, I know I talk to a lot of people now who say I was a born entrepreneur. I could never work for somebody else. And I had to be a business owner. That was never me. I probably could have spent my life in the corporate world. It wasn't until I went out on my own, for reasons other than this natural drive to go out on my own. It wasn't until I did that till I realized, oh, I kind of enjoy this. This is nice. If I wouldn't have had that impetus to go out on my own, I easily could have spent the rest of my life in the corporate world and probably been very happy.
So why did you leave?
For my wife and myself, and both of us, we met, we worked together in a big company. We worked together at eBay. And when we decided to get married, we were both in our mid-30s. And we realized she was working 100 hours a week. I mean, she was flying the corporate jet. She was Meg Whitman, who was the CEO of eBay. She was Meg Whitman's right-hand woman and had this high-powered job. I was traveling a couple of weeks a month as well. And basically, the entire year and a half that we dated, we rarely ever saw each other. We would pass each other in the airport. And again, when we were single, it was great. But the day that I asked her to marry me, we basically sat down and we said, we need to have a really serious discussion. We're both in our mid-30s. We both wanted a family. We both wanted kids. And the lifestyle that we were leading just wasn't conducive to that. And so it took about literally 5 minutes for us to decide, okay, the right thing to do is to quit our jobs, to start a family, and to figure out something else that would kind of allow us to put our family and our life ahead of work. And so we said, okay, we set a date 6 months in advance. And I had we both had some stock options that were vesting, and we picked the right date for us. And we said, this is the date that we're both going to quit our jobs. We're going to move back to the East Coast, closer to family, and we'll figure out the next part of our lives. And so we quit our jobs on that day. We moved back to the East Coast, and we said, okay, let's figure out what we can do to kind of create a lifestyle that allows us to put family and life before business. And it took us a few months. We accidentally fell into real estate, but real estate ended up being that first vehicle that allowed us to kind of modulate our life and our work in the right way. It allowed us, we were working 7 days a week, but we were working when we wanted to work. We were working together. We were working together as a family. And then from there, we built a couple other businesses. And so that it naturally evolved from us realizing that the big corporate lifestyle wasn't conducive to us having a family as well.
Was that easy to do, to just walk away like that?
So one of the things that I've realized, and I don't want to tell other people how to live their lives or about their relationships. One of the things that's worked so well for my wife and myself is that we're very, very much on the same page when it comes to family, life, money, business, all of those things. And so I know for a lot of people, that could have been a really, really difficult decision, a difficult choice. Luckily, we were both on the same page. And as much as we were both in just completely engulfed in that lifestyle of high-powered corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, it literally took us about 5 minutes for us both to say, nope, this isn't the right thing to do if we're going to have a family. And it was amazingly, I mean, I look back and it couldn't have been an easier decision. It's very weird to say that, but it could not have been an easier decision. And we said it at the time. We said, look, if we struggle trying to figure out how to make it, if we don't make as much money, if we don't figure out an easy path to maintaining our lifestyle, that's okay. As long as we have the family, as long as we're putting the family first, the money and the wealth and all that other stuff is secondary. And we've both always been on the same page with that. And I think that's been part of why we've been so successful, is that we both recognize that that there's that inherent risk when you go out on your own, but it's okay. We'll figure it out if something goes wrong. And it's always more important to put the family first, even if there's a risk associated with that.
That's not normal, in the sense that that's not the way people behave or act or think through it. at least in today's culture, that's what I see.
What I found is that we know a lot of people that have felt that way. We also, like you point out, it's not common. We know a lot of people who are just the opposite. What seems important to me, and talking to a lot of couples, and my wife and I talk to a lot of couples that try and get into the business world and investing, and I feel like we end up being therapists sometimes. But what we found is it tends to work when both people are on the same page. Doesn't matter what that page is. But when they both have the same attitude towards family and money and business and freedom, it will tend to work itself out. It's when there's this mismatch in desires and expectations and goals and fears and risk, that's when there's an issue. And so for us, I look back and I really think we could have both been on the completely opposite page, but as long as we were on the same page, we would have figured it out. It's when two people are on different pages that I think the issue really starts to creep in.
And that's true. And that's why you and whoever your significant other is need to figure out that you're on the same page, doing the same things with the same goals, and that you support each other instead of fighting against each other.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of take a left turn here. You've written a lot of books about real estate, about business, and I know you're very analytical, and I've heard you talk in the past about business cycles. And I have really struggled with this last business cycle because as you probably did, I went through 2000, and that one was easy to call. Like in 2000, I'm like, these people are nuts. I'm out. No more sock puppets. I'm going to watch this decline. And it declined and it came back. The next run was phenomenal. I saw that real estate was crazy. I didn't expect real estate to mess with my world on Wall Street, but it did. And then after that, we got heavy into real estate, and we had a wonderful run from 2008 to literally today. I mean, we had a blip last year due to COVID, but it was so short. This is not normal in cycles. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Certainly, like you said, what we saw between 2008 and I kind of draw a dividing line last March. We can talk about what's happened in the last year, but between 2008 and the beginning of 2020, even that wasn't particularly normal. In the business cycle, in the economic cycle, we've had enough of those over the last 150 years. There have been 33 full economic cycles. When we talk about the economic cycle, we talk about basically an expansion in the economy, what we refer to as the good times or the boom times, where wages are going up and employment is high and people are making a lot of money and all the good stuff. Inflation tends to be pretty low. And then you get to like this inflection point, the top of the market, and something happens. And a lot of times we, especially those of us who are younger, who have only lived through a couple of these cycles, we tend to think of it as some bubble pop. So in 2008, it was real estate. In 2001, it was the tech bubble. And back in the 70s, it was oil. We tend to think some bubble pops, and then we hit this downturn, this recession. After 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, we hit the bottom, and then we start going back up the curve and things get better again. And we call that entire up, down, and back up, that an economic cycle. Typically, these economic cycles last on the order of 6.5 years. And this, when I tell people this surprises a lot of people because, again, a lot of people who are probably listening to this are on the younger side. They may have started paying attention back in 2008 with the massive downturn in 2008. But anybody that was paying attention before 2008 realized that 12 years between 2008 and 2020, between the bust and the next bust, was an extremely long period of time. It was actually the longest economic cycle in history. And again, if you go back 150 years, there have been about 33 of these cycles. You can do the math. 150 divided by 33 says that typical cycle lasts 6.5 years. And so 12 years was extremely long period of time. And so there was a lot of reason to believe going into 2017, 18, 19, just based on the timing, just based on the fact that we had passed that 9-year mark and that 10-year mark, and we had gotten into literally the longest cycle in history. There's a lot of reason to think that we were nearing the end of this cycle. We were getting to the top of the market and that we were heading towards recession. Now, in addition to the timing piece, there was also the actual economic data. There's a lot of economic data that was kind of pointing towards the fact that we might be hitting the top of the market. Bond yields. So we talk a lot about the government issues new money or debt in the form of bonds. And the interest rate that those bonds are paying is driven by supply and demand. And when those bond yields do some interesting things, we can tend to say, hey, we're probably getting towards the end of the cycle. We saw corporate debt hit an all-time high, and corporate debt's a good indicator of where we might be going in the economic cycle. We started to see inflation. So we started to see inflation picking up a little bit at the end of 2018. And so that was an indication we might be getting towards the end of the economic cycle. And there's a whole lot of data that was indicating that we might be getting towards the end of the economic cycle. And so going into 2020, there was a lot of talk over, is this thing going to continue into 2020? Are we going to continue to see a strong real estate market, a strong employment landscape, a strong real estate market, or are we going to see a downturn? And then obviously COVID hit. And when COVID hit, I think the first reaction for a lot of us was, this is Armageddon. This is the end of the world. And we saw GDP drop to like negative 30%. People stopped buying stuff. Oil was stacking up. Oil tankers were stacking up in the Pacific. They couldn't deliver oil because nobody was using oil. And unemployment went to 20-some%. And it felt like Armageddon. And I think back last March or April, a lot of us were saying, wow, this could be the next Great Depression. This could be the biggest financial event since the 1930s. And then April, May, June came around and the world didn't end. The stock market recovered within a few weeks. The real estate market started to boom. Unemployment stayed steady. It didn't really drop below about 15 million, 16 million people. And a lot of people started to say, well, what's going on here? Like, basically, nobody is working. We have the worst economic environment in history, and yet we're seeing the stock market doing well. We're seeing the real estate market doing well. Gold isn't skyrocketing like a lot of people would expect. What's going on here? And here we are now. It's a year after COVID, and we're kind of still in that place. The stock market's at an all-time high. Real estate, anybody that does real estate realizes that in most places in the country, real estate is valued higher than it has been in history. We're still seeing wage growth, which we can talk about why that is. It's not necessarily because companies are paying more money, but we're seeing wage growth. We're seeing unemployment numbers at least stabilized at about 9-10%. We're seeing a lot of things that indicate the economy isn't nearly as bad as we all thought it was going to be. And so why is that? And one of the big reasons I think everybody can agree is that over the last year, the government has printed, or the Federal Reserve and the Treasury have printed about $6 trillion. And that's about 40% of the total amount of money that's flowed into our economy in history we've added over the last year. And when you add that much money to the economy, and think about where all that money is going, that money goes to kind of two places. It goes to the people that need it. So the people that are having trouble paying their rent and buying their groceries and making their car payment. And so it's going to those people, which is fantastic. But that's the minority of that money. The majority of that money is going to people who don't necessarily need it to survive. It's going to larger business owners. It's going to middle class people. It's going even to wealthy people. And so people that are getting all of this, whether it's stimulus money, whether it's SBA loans, PPP, IDL money, whether it's bailout money, when people get all this money, if they don't need it to buy their necessities, if they don't need to pay their rent, if they don't need it to buy groceries, what are they doing with it? Well, they might put it in the bank. And we've actually seen the savings rate higher over the last several months than at any time in history. The personal savings rate is absolutely through the roof. So a lot of people are just putting that money in the bank. But then there are a lot of people And I'm one of those people. You're probably one of those people that is taking this money that's flowing in and they're putting it into assets. They're putting it into the stock market. They're putting it into real estate. They're putting it into gold or silver. They're putting it into wherever. And so what we're seeing is, while there are a lot of people that are suffering, that are out of work, that are having trouble paying their rent, that are having trouble paying their mortgage, at the other end of the spectrum, there are all these people that are taking all this money and sticking it into hard assets. And we're seeing the stock market going crazy. We're seeing the real estate market going crazy. We're seeing the crypto market going crazy because all of these people that don't have anything else to do with the $6 trillion that's being printed, they're putting that money into assets. And so we're kind of seeing this dichotomy in the economy right now. We're seeing that those that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, they're struggling. People are still out of work. People are having trouble paying their rent. People are having trouble paying their mortgage. People are having trouble paying for their groceries. And then at the other end of the spectrum, people are flush with cash and they're pumping up the stock market. They're pumping up the real estate market, and things are going through the roof. And it's this dichotomy that's really driving the economy right now. If you look at it through a certain lens, we're kind of in a really bad recession, 10% unemployment and interest rates basically at zero, and corporate debt and personal debt at an all-time high. But then at the other end of the spectrum, if you look at it through a different lens, we're kind of in the greatest market in history. Real estate is at an all-time high. Stock market's at an all-time high. Crypto's at an all-time high. Hard assets are an all-time high. And so there really is this dichotomy today. And what I like to say is, because of COVID, we've kind of left the economic cycle. We're no longer kind of on that natural cycle of up and then down and then up again. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere right now because everything is artificial. There's so much money that's being pumped into the system. When you look at the real estate market, we talk about real estate prices being through the roof. Part of that is that there are millions of potential real estate sellers out there, people that own their houses, who would love to be selling their houses in this market because you can get so much for your house right now. But they don't want to sell their houses because we're in the middle of COVID, and they don't want buyers trouncing through their house, potentially exposing them to COVID. So there are a whole bunch of people that are still quarantining and not selling their house. The minute we have herd immunity with the COVID vaccine, I have a feeling we're going to see millions of people say, okay, I'm ready to list my house. And supply for housing is going to go through the roof. And when supply goes through the roof, but demand doesn't necessarily change, we're going to see a softening in the real estate market. Likewise, when we stop seeing all the stimulus money flowing into the economy, people aren't going to have as much to just kind of throw at the stock market or throw at the crypto market. And I think we're going to see a softening in the stock market and other hard asset markets as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens once we're past COVID, once we get to herd immunity, and once we kind of get back to natural supply and demand. Because right now, I just kind of liken it to, we're no longer on that curve. And when we get back on that curve, we have no idea if we're going to be at the top, the bottom, or somewhere in the middle.
And that's the problem. Not knowing where you're going to be. For me, when I look at real estate, I think this is what happened in the auto market. And I think it's kind of transferred over to the housing market. People don't buy the cost of the car, they buy the monthly payment.
Yep.
And so when interest rates dropped by almost 1%, I guess a year ago, it seemed to correspond to how much the value of houses went up.
Absolutely.
And so people were still spending the same amount per month. It's just that they were paying a lot more. Now, I don't know how long we can maintain these interest rates, but I've got a feeling that if interest rates reverse, and we've been on, so I remember when interest rates were 18%, when if you wanted a mortgage, it was literally impossible. People who were selling houses were loaning people money at 12 and 14% to buy their house because that was the only way they could sell it. If we start going into a reversal where interest rates start going up over time, and it might be 10 or 20 or 30 years away, that's going to dramatically drive what happens, I think, to real estate prices. But we just have to wait. I've learned I can't predict anything anymore. I just have to watch and see which way the water's flowing and paddle.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it's going to be a while before we see interest rates increase. We may see mortgage rates increase because, keep in mind, interest rates and mortgage rates don't necessarily work in perfect lockstep. mortgage rates tend to be a little bit more supply and demand driven. Interest rates, when we talk about interest rates, we're talking about that government federal funds rate, that rate that's about 0% right now. That's kind of defined by the Federal Reserve, whereas mortgage rates are kind of more supply and demand. So we may see mortgage rates fluctuate a little bit, but I think that main interest rate number, that federal funds rate, I think is locked at somewhere near zero for the near future for a couple of reasons. One, the Federal Reserve has already said flat out, we want more inflation. Basically, they came out a few months ago and they said, historically, or over the last decade, we've targeted 2% inflation. Now we're targeting average 2% inflation over time, which means that they've gotten less than 2% inflation, but they want to average 2%, which means over the next several years, they want to target 3 or 4 or 5% so that they can get the average up to 2%. Best way to drive inflation, if you're the head of the Federal Reserve, is to keep interest rates low. So I think if the Fed wants to hit that target of 2 or 3% inflation, and typically the Fed gets what they want, we're going to have to keep interest rates low. The other thing is that interest rates define how much the government is paying in interest on the debt, on all that money that they're printing. And the more money they print, the more they're going to have to pay in debt when those interest rates rise. And so I think just for the good of the economy as a whole and the good of our national budget, I think we're going to have to keep interest rates low until we figured out how to kind of get the entire the deficit and the debt under control. So my take is, and I've been wrong plenty of times. Please don't anybody take this as gospel, but my take is we've got low interest rates for at least 3 or 5 years, if not much longer.
And I won't disagree with you. And part of that is because they'd rather inflate the debt away. So,
yep.
The problem comes when inflation's at 4% and you're only getting 2%, you're losing money every year and you don't realize it.
Absolutely.
And I think that is kind of what the government wants to do next. And I will just continue to paddle and figure it out.
But there's a good lesson there. The government is smart enough to realize that if we're going to have inflation, debt is probably the absolute best way to hedge that inflation. And for any investors out there who are thinking, what should I be doing if I'm worried about inflation over the next few years? And I'm not telling people that I definitely think inflation's coming, but I do believe it is. That's my guess. For anybody else out there that thinks that inflation is coming, keep in mind, debt is actually a really good way to hedge against inflation. I'm not telling anybody to get too much debt. I'm not telling anybody to max out their credit cards. I'm not talking about consumer debt. But if you own real estate, consider getting a moderate loan against your real estate. Having a loan against your personal residence, even if you don't have to, may be a good thing, because if we see inflation, we're paying off that debt with inflated dollars. We're paying off debt with dollars that are worth less than today. And it's basically a great arbitrage play. If you think inflation's coming, debt is a great way to make money during that inflationary period. And again, I'm not telling anybody to take on too much debt. I'm not telling anybody to take on bad debt, consumer debt. But if you own your own house, if you own rental property, debt can be a great hedge against that potential inflation to come.
And that is very, very true. So I'd like to take one last pivot, because this is kind of a favorite topic of mine. I love to negotiate everything. Uh-huh. And you've written a book, The Power of Negotiating, and it's real estate focused. And even though the book is real estate focused, I think the principles apply to everything. Life is full of negotiations, and unfortunately, we as Americans don't negotiate. And there is tremendous power in negotiating. And I know when I buy my real estate, it's all about negotiating. Even when I go to Home Depot and Lowe's, I negotiate. You can negotiate in a variety of areas of life. And I think what I really enjoyed about the book was that you showed that negotiating isn't just about the price itself, but there are so many other factors to negotiating. And when you start understanding all those factors, you can truly understand how to get more out of the deal. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I have to make sure to give credit where credit is due. So I had 2 co-authors on that book. One is my beautiful wife, Carol, and another good friend investor of mine, Mark Ferguson. My wife is the master negotiator in this house. And so while I guess I have top billing on that book, I give my wife most of the credit for writing that book. She is an absolutely amazing negotiator. But some of the big lessons that I would hope people would take away, whether you read the book or not, but some of the big lessons to take away in general are, one, the biggest, and it's funny because as you become a better negotiator, this becomes obvious, but until you become a better negotiator, it's not. But the biggest way to improve your negotiation skills is to improve your ability to connect with people. Good negotiation is all about relationships. And when you think about it, that makes sense. If I'm going to buy something from somebody, they're more likely to give me a good deal if they like me personally than if they don't like me. If somebody doesn't like me, you think they're going to want to give away whatever it is they have? But think about the last time that you were negotiating something with a friend or somebody you knew, and you were on the side of, they asked you for something. They said, hey, can you give me a discount here? Maybe you own a business and one of your friends comes and says, hey, I'd love to give your business my business, but can you give me a discount? What are you going to say? You're going to say yes, because you have a relationship with that person. It's much harder to say no. It's much harder to negotiate really hard with somebody you know and like. And even if it's not somebody that you've known for a long time, if you can build a relationship with that person you're negotiating with, there's a much more likely chance that they're going to be willing, either because they want to or because they feel bad not giving you a great deal. So a large part of being a great negotiator is being really good at building rapport with that person on the other side of the table. And my wife is a master at this, and she doesn't do it from a negotiating standpoint. For her, it's natural. I mean, there have been plenty of houses, and we've bought literally hundreds of houses over the years. And a lot of times we buy them directly from the sellers. And my wife is very good at building these relationships where she might meet somebody who has the potential for selling their house. And it's months or even years later before we buy their house. And she spends that time building the relationship. And again, she doesn't do it because she's thinking about one day I'm going to want to buy their house for cheap. She does it because she just naturally builds relationships. But what we've realized, or what she knows intuitively, is that building those relationships will eventually pay off when it comes to actually negotiating something with those people. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and you said this yourself, Rocky, is that we tend to think negotiations are all about money. Everybody tends to think that there's only one currency when it comes to a negotiation, and that's cash. That's the US dollar. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I think a lot of us as investors or business owners, we tend to think in terms of it's all about the money. But you have to remember that a lot of times you're negotiating with somebody who has a motive that's not just money. And I'll use real estate as an example, but you can find examples in any industry. But in the real estate world, we often negotiate with potential sellers who we think they want the most money for their house, but that's not really what they're looking to do. I've talked to sellers before who we bought a bunch of houses from people who are hoarders. Like literally you walk into their house and floor to ceiling trash, or they don't consider it trash, but a lot of us would. And their motivation in selling their house isn't to get the most money. Their motivation is to get that house sold with as little embarrassment as possible. They would never list the house with a real estate agent because they're terrified of the real estate agent or the buyers walking through the house and judging them for all the trash in their house or how bad a shape their house is in. And so for them, their major motivation is to get out of that house because they need to sell for some reason, but to do it in a way that's as little embarrassment as possible. So if you can walk into them and say, hey, I get it. I've seen this before and it happens. It's not your fault. And don't worry, I'm not going to bring an inspector in. I'm not going to bring anybody else through the house. You can leave whatever you want here. You don't have to clean it up. You don't have to take it with you. This will be the last time you see me until the day we close on the house. If we can come to a deal, a lot of times that is going to optimize their currency, that currency of minimizing, in this case, embarrassment. And so they're going to be willing to give me a much better deal than if basically they were just looking to make the most money as possible. I've had sellers who have basically said, yeah, I'd love to sell, but I don't know how to move. And you hear that and you think, well, they must have meant something else. But no, I had a seller, she was probably in her 70s, who had been in that house literally since she was a little girl, had never, ever moved. And she literally didn't know the process of selling the house and moving into a new place. And she wanted to move to a different state. She wanted to be closer to her sister. And what we said was, well, let us help you. Look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to hire professional movers. They're going to come in. They're going to pack up your stuff. They're going to drive it to wherever you want to go. And wherever you want to go, we'll find you a real estate agent that can help you find a rental property or a house to buy. And we're going to help you every step of the way, because for them, it wasn't about getting the most money. They wanted to sell their house, but they were just terrified because they literally didn't know how to move out of that house and into the next house. And it sounds crazy to us because most of us deal with moving. But by digging in, building a relationship, and really finding out what that person's currency was, what their motivation was, what we realized was it wasn't money. And so oftentimes what you find when you really talk to people and you're not just focused on the money yourself, when you're focused on the relationship, what you find is the other person is looking to optimize something other than just making the most money. Now, in the real estate world, obviously 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 times, it's just going to be the money. The seller is going to say, nope, I'm going to take the highest offer. But that other 1 or 2 times out of 10 where it's not just the money, that's where the money is made for you. That's where the deals are made, because you're able to give that seller what they really want, because you're willing to have a conversation with them and find out what it is they really want and they really need. And in return, you're probably going to get a great deal.
And that's true. And when it comes to B2B negotiation, money is usually the last thing that they want to negotiate. Because they don't, it's not their money, so they don't even care. And the same thing when you walk into Home Depot or Lowe's and want to negotiate. The manager doesn't care about the money. He cares that he needs floor space, or he doesn't want to store something for the winter, or his metrics he's got a metric that he needs to hit. In the auto industry, they've got to move so many cars a month. And they get big rebates for that. So they don't care if they make money on that car. They just need another unit out the door. And so understanding those marketplace and people's motivations is a big, big part of that. So we always like to ask people about taking an action step. So based on our conversation today, what's one action step people can take to move forward this week?
So I'm a big believer, and again, I'm going to tie this back to real estate, but this really goes for most things we do in life. I've talked to literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who are either real estate investors or want to be real estate investors. And what I found is that every single, I should never say every single one, there's always exceptions, but the vast, vast majority of those people fall into one of 2 categories. One, they have never done a real estate deal. They've done 0 deals. They want to do a deal. They've studied, they've thought about it. They've talked to people, they've planned, but they haven't yet done a deal. That's about 90, 95, 98%. I'm making up numbers, but some vast majority of the people have never done a real estate deal, but they want to. Then the other group of people that I always tend to meet are the people that have done 2 or 5 or 10 or 50 or 100 deals. Here's the group of people that I never meet because they're not out there. I never meet anybody that's done a single real estate deal. And there's a reason for that. If you can do that first deal, the second one becomes that much easier. And the third one becomes that much easier. It goes back to our discussion earlier about with kids, basically you have to keep reinforcing things until it clicks. Well, typically by the time you've done that first deal, you've learned enough that it's clicked. And now you say, oh, now I see how this works. And the second one comes that much easier. And the third one comes that much easier. Same way in business. I meet people that start a business and it doesn't really go anywhere. So they started another business, doesn't go anywhere. They started another business. But the first time that business actually makes a sale or drives a monthly profit or has some level of success, the business owner says, now I get it. Now I see what I was doing wrong before. It all makes sense. And that second, repeating that success is that much easier. And the third time is that much easier. And the 5th time and the 10th time are that much easier. So what I like to tell people is the first time for anything is always really difficult. And we're conditioned to, when we see something that's really difficult, we give up. But what I tell people is don't give up until you do it the first time. After you do something one time, if you want to give up at that point, that's the time to give up, but you never do. If you can do something the first time, you're going to do it the second and the 5th and the 10th and the 50th. So what I tell people is make a commitment to get something done the first time, and then give yourself permission to say, okay, now I'm done. Because more times than not, what you're going to say is, I'm not done because now I realize how easy it is. So that's the big action step, is just make that commitment to get something done one single time, and then give yourself permission to stop if you decide to stop after you complete it that first time.
And that is a great action step. And I always tell people going from 0 to 1 is harder than going from 1 to 100. So Get the first step in and everything works out phenomenally. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Providing value to others. So what I found more and more in my life is the more I give, the more I get back. And don't give with the expectation of getting back. Just give. Just provide value every single day, and it will eventually come back to you.
And it's not going to come back directly. Sometimes it takes a circuitous path, and sometimes it takes a while. It's not like
Absolutely.
I give today and the response comes tomorrow.
Absolutely.
It's a constant that you have to go through. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I can say this, and it's one of those things that anybody that's too young will take it and ignore it. But what I learned was life is short. And you never think that the time is going to come where you feel like you're pressured to really do stuff. I always thought, especially in my money journey, I always thought I'm always going to have more time. Yeah, I don't have to get out of debt today because I can do it next week or next month or next year or 10 years from now. And then one day you wake up and you realize, oh, wow, I'm 40 years old or I'm 45 years old. And you start to feel like, okay, for the first time, I feel like I'm running out of time and I wish I would have started sooner. So that's the big lesson I wish I would have learned younger, is that recognition that start now and don't put things off.
And that's true. Time is the one resource that we don't essentially ever get a chance to buy back. I mean, we can buy convenience, but you can't get your time back. And especially when the kids are young, don't waste it. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Say no more than you say yes. I think too many of us spend our lives saying yes to things and spreading ourselves too thin, trying to do too many things. I wish I would have learned when I was younger that focus is the key to success, and say no to most things in your life, not obviously family and friends and people you care about, but when it comes to opportunities, there's nothing wrong with not trying to do too many things. I think it was Wendy Papasan, Jay Papasan, the guy who wrote The One Thing. His wife said to me, and I really love this, if you try and chase two rabbits, you're not going to catch either one. And it's really true. You need to focus and you need to say no more often in your life. I wish I would have learned to say no a long time ago.
And that's true, but say no appropriately.
Absolutely.
Not, out of fear, because you're not willing to try something. But yes, you need to be focused. I'm still learning that. Eventually I'll get there.
You have to remember that every time you say yes to something, whether you realize it or not, you're saying no to something else. And always think about before you say yes, think about all those things or what that thing is that you're inherently saying no to when you say yes, and then you might reconsider.
Makes so much sense. If people would like to connect with you, learn more about what you do, follow your work, what's the best way for them to find that out?
Absolutely. If you go to www.connectwithjscott, just the letter J, connectwithjscott.com, that will link out to all my other links.
Cool. And we will put that in the show notes to make it easy for people to find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
This was great. Thanks so much, Rocky.
Are you living the life you want to live? You ready to make a bold move like Jay and his wife Carol did? Are you and your spouse on the same page? As always, I have a ton of questions. One other one is, do you negotiate for what you want? There's nothing wrong with this. The other day, I got a few dollars off at Jiffy Lube just because I asked, hey, do you have any coupons for this? Did you get any action steps from listening to Jay as he talked about how he teaches his kids about money? Here's the deal right now. Markets are in flux, and I don't know what the future holds. But you need to be ready to pivot as the markets do. Bonds are at all-time highs. Stocks are at all-time highs. Real estate's crazy. I don't know what to tell you. I will say what got you here may not get you to the next point in wealth building. So be vigilant. I cannot predict the future, but I can watch which way the winds blow and try and get in the flow. This week's action step was based around real estate. Everyone either never does real estate deals or they do a bunch. So I want to take the first step. It's difficult, but it gets easier over time. Make a commitment to get something done, and then decide and take the first step. I know I struggled to take my first step, even though I had tons of knowledge. Just remember, everyone needs a place to live. That's a big market to be involved in. Next week, we're going to talk about head trash, the leading killer of human potential with Rini Cavalieri. Maybe that's what's holding you back from real estate or your own business or your ultimate life. Hey, if you liked today's episode, ask yourself, who else could benefit from this? And share it with them. They'll thank you, and so will I. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.